I don't need love. I need someone who can lie without flinching. The words land cold and precise, like a contract already signed before the pen even touches paper, and Clara Hayes feels them settle somewhere deep in her chest as she stands in the center of a glass-walled office 30 floors above Manhattan, her worn shoes quiet against polished marble, her reflection faint in the window behind him. A girl who doesn't belong in a world this sharp, this controlled, this expensive, and yet here she is. Because rent is overdue, because her father's medical bills don't pause for dignity, because sometimes survival doesn't ask what you believe in. It asks what you're willing to risk, and Nathaniel Reed doesn't look at her like a man asking. He looks at her like a man deciding. His tailored suit perfect, his posture effortless, his voice measured, every inch of him built from discipline and distance. And still, somehow, his eyes search her like she's the variable he can't quite calculate. I can't lie, Clara says quietly, her fingers tightening around the strap of her faded bag. And for a moment there's silence, the kind that stretches just long enough to feel dangerous, before the corner of his mouth lifts. Not quite a smile, more like recognition of a challenge he didn't expect. That's exactly why I'm hiring you, he replies, sliding a thin stack of papers across the desk, the contract crisp, the ink sharp, the terms already binding even before she reads them. And Clara hesitates, not because she doesn't understand what this is, but because she understands it too well. A fake marriage, appearances only, a role to play in a world that thrives on illusion. Except she has never been good at pretending, never learned how to soften truth into something easier to swallow, never mastered the quiet art of saying what people want instead of what's real. And yet the number printed at the bottom of the page could change everything, could buy time, could keep the lights on, could mean one less night wondering how far things will fall before they break completely. You'll attend events with me, speak when necessary, follow the rules. Nathaniel continues, his tone steady, controlled, like he's built his entire life on rules that never bend. No emotional involvement, no personal interference, and no mistakes. And Clara almost laughs at that last part, because if there's one thing she's certain of, it's that she is made of mistakes, stitched together from moments where honesty cost her more than silence ever could. But something about the way he watches her, like he's waiting to see if she'll walk away, makes her stay rooted in place, makes her wonder why a man who could hire anyone would choose someone like her, someone who just told him she can't do the one thing he claims to need. Why me? She asks, her voice softer now, but steadier, and Nathaniel leans back slightly, studying her, as if the answer is simpler than the question. Because everyone else already knows how to lie, he says, and I need someone who hasn't learned yet. And that's when Clara realizes this isn't just about pretending. This is about control, about building a version of reality that no one can question, and somehow he believes her truth is the safest disguise of all. And the thought should scare her, should send her straight back to the street where everything is uncertain, but at least it's honest. But instead she finds herself pulling out the chair, sitting down, and reaching for the pen. Because sometimes the most dangerous decisions don't feel like falling. They feel like the only way to stand. Clara signs her name slower than she expects, each letter deliberate, as if writing it carefully might somehow soften the weight of what she is agreeing to. The pen gliding across paper that feels far too expensive for someone who has spent the last 3 months counting every dollar. And when she finishes, she sets it down with a quiet breath she did not realize she was holding. Because something about that moment feels final, like a door closing behind her even before she knows what is on the other side. And Nathaniel Reed does not hesitate. He simply flips the contract closed, as if this decision was already made long before she walked into his office, as if she has just stepped into a role that has been waiting for her. Good, he says, standing, his voice calm, efficient, already moving forward. We do not have much time. And Clara blinks, trying to catch up, because everything about this is moving faster than she expected, faster than she is ready for. But she follows him anyway, because walking away now would mean going back to a life that is already slipping through her fingers. And that feels more frightening than anything he has said so far. They move through the office, past glass walls and quiet assistants who do not look surprised to see him, but definitely look surprised to see her, their eyes lingering for just a second too long on her worn coat, her simple jeans, The way she does not quite match the world she is stepping into. And Clara feels it. That contrast pressing against her like a spotlight she cannot turn off. But Nathaniel does not slow down, does not explain, does not acknowledge it at all. As if the difference between them is irrelevant or maybe just expected. Your first appearance is tomorrow night, he says as they step into a private elevator, the doors sliding shut with a soft click that echoes louder than it should. A charity gala. Media will be there, investors will be there, and they will all be watching. Clara's stomach tightens at the thought. The idea of standing in a room full of strangers who belong to a world she has only ever seen from the outside. People who know exactly how to speak, how to move, how to smile in ways that say everything without saying anything real. I told you, I am not good at pretending, she says again, quieter this time, because now it matters more. Now there is something real at stake, and Nathaniel finally looks at her, really looks at her, his gaze steady, unreadable. You are not pretending, he replies. You are simply choosing what to say. And Clara almost shakes her head, because to her, that is the same thing, but to him, it clearly is not. The elevator opens into a quiet underground garage, a black car waiting as if it has been. They're all along, and the driver steps out immediately, opening the door without a word. Everything smooth, rehearsed, controlled, and Clara hesitates just for a second before getting in, because once she sits down, once the door closes, this becomes real in a way she cannot undo. The city lights blur past the window as they drive, tall buildings stretching into the night sky, each one a reminder of how small she feels in comparison, and she presses her hands together in her lap, grounding herself in something familiar, something steady. What happens if I mess this up? She asks, her voice barely above a whisper, not looking at him this time, because she is not sure she wants to see his reaction. And there is a pause, just long enough to make her heart beat a little faster, before he answers, You will not. He says simply, like it is a fact, like failure is not even an option in his world. And Clara exhales slowly, because she wishes she had that kind of certainty, wishes she could believe it the way he does, but deep down she knows the truth. She has never been good at playing roles, never been able to hide what she feels or shape her words into something safer. And tomorrow night, standing beside a man who built his life on control and precision, she is expected to become someone else entirely. And for the first time since she signed that contract, Clara wonders if the most dangerous part of this deal is not pretending to be his wife, but what might happen when she cannot stop herself from being exactly who she is. The next evening arrives faster than Clara is ready for, and before she can second-guess anything, she is standing in front of a full-length mirror in a quiet suite that feels more like a luxury hotel than a place someone actually lives, her reflection almost unrecognizable. The simple girl from yesterday replaced by someone polished, composed, someone who looks like she belongs beside a man like Nathaniel Reed. The dress fits perfectly, deep navy, elegant without trying too hard, the kind of fabric that moves softly when she breathes. And for a moment she just stares at herself, unsure if she should feel proud or unsettled, because this version of her looks convincing, and that is exactly what scares her. You are overthinking. Nathaniel's voice comes from behind her, calm as ever, and when she turns, he is already dressed, black tuxedo, effortless. Like he stepped out of a world she is still trying to understand. His eyes scan her quickly, not lingering, not emotional, just assessing, and then he nods once. This will work, he says, and somehow that feels more intimidating than a compliment. Clara lets out a small breath, smoothing her hands over the fabric. I do not know what I am supposed to say in there, she admits, her honesty slipping out before she can filter it, and Nathaniel steps closer, not too close, just enough that his presence feels grounding instead of overwhelming. Then do not speak unless you have to, he replies, his tone steady. And when you do, keep it simple. People trust simplicity more than perfection. Clara watches him carefully, because for someone who built his life on control, he speaks about trust like it is something distant, something observed rather than felt. And if they ask something I cannot answer, she presses, needing something more concrete than calm instructions, and for the first time, there is the slightest pause in his expression, like he is considering her in a different way. Then you tell the truth, he says, and Clara blinks, caught off guard, because that is not what she expected. Not in a situation built entirely on appearances. The truth, she repeats, and he nods once. Just not all of it. He adds, and that is when she realizes this is not about lying at all. It is about control, about choosing which pieces of reality to reveal and which ones to keep hidden. And somehow that feels even more complicated than pretending. The car ride to the gala is quieter this time. The city alive around them, lights stretching across the streets, people moving quickly, unaware of the world she is about to step into. And Clara watches it all through the window, trying to steady herself, reminding herself why she said yes, why she cannot afford to fail. The car slows, then stops. And when the door opens, the sound hits her first. Voices, cameras, the low hum of a crowd waiting just beyond the entrance. And her heart begins to race, not from fear exactly, but from the weight of expectation pressing down all at once. Nathaniel steps out first, then turns, extending his hand toward her. A simple gesture, practiced, but something about it feels more significant than it should, and Clara hesitates for just half a second before placing her hand in his grip firm, steady, as if he is anchoring her to this moment. Remember, he says quietly, just for her. You belong here because I say you do. And Clara looks at him, really looks at him, because there is something in that statement that does not sit right, something that makes her chest tighten, but there is no time to question it. Not now. Not when the doors open and the world shifts, cameras flashing, voices calling his name. And suddenly they are no longer two strangers with a contract. They are a couple, a story, something the world believes in without question. And as Clara steps forward beside him, feeling every eye turn toward her, she realizes this is the moment everything begins to change. Not because she is pretending to be someone else, but because for the first time, she is being seen in a way she never has before, and she has no idea whether that will save her or break her. The moment they step inside, the noise softens into something more controlled, a low hum of conversation layered over soft music, the kind of room where every smile is measured and every glance carries weight. And Clara feels it immediately, the shift in atmosphere, the way people notice without staring, the way attention moves subtly but deliberately toward Nathaniel and, by extension, toward her. His hand still lightly guiding hers as they walk forward, steady, unhurried, like he has done this 1,000 times, and maybe he has. But for Clara, every step feels new, every breath slightly too shallow, every movement something she has to think about instead of just doing. Relax your shoulders. Nathaniel murmurs quietly without looking at her, his voice barely above the music, and she realizes she has been holding tension like armor, so she lets it drop, just a little, trying to match his rhythm, trying to blend into a world that feels like it was never meant for her. A man approaches first, older, confident, his handshake firm as he greets Nathaniel by name, his eyes flicking toward Clara with polite curiosity. And you must be the woman everyone has been wondering about, he says with a small smile, and Clara feels the weight of that sentence, the expectation hidden inside it, the unspoken question, who are you and why are you here? She opens her mouth, instinct pushing her to explain, to justify, to tell the truth the way she always does. But then she remembers Nathaniel's words, choose what to say. And for the first time, she pauses, just long enough to feel the difference. Clara, she says simply, her voice calm, steady. It is nice to meet you. And something about that answer works, because the man nods, satisfied, moving on without pressing further. And Clara feels a small shift inside her, not confidence exactly, but something close to it, like she has just stepped onto a path she does not fully understand yet. Conversation flows around them, people coming and going, each interaction brief but meaningful, and Clara starts to notice patterns, the way Nathaniel speaks less than others, the way he listens more than he reveals, the way his presence alone seems to command respect without effort. And slowly, she adjusts, matching his pace, speaking when needed, staying quiet when it matters, until a voice cuts through the room, sharper, more deliberate. Nathaniel, I was not expecting you to make such a public announcement tonight. Clara turns slightly, and the woman approaching is impossible to ignore, elegant, poised, every detail precise, her smile polite but not warm, her eyes settling on Clara with a kind of interest that feels less like curiosity and more like calculation. And you brought a surprise. The woman adds, her tone smooth. But there is something underneath it, something testing, and Clara feels it immediately. This is not a casual interaction. This is a moment, a test she did not prepare for. Nathaniel's hand tightens just slightly against hers. A subtle signal, grounding. Clara, this is Victoria Langford, he says, his voice even, controlled, and Clara nods, offering the same simple smile she has been practicing all evening. It is nice to meet you, she says again. But Victoria does not move on as easily as the others, her gaze steady, thoughtful. How did you two meet? She asks, and Clara feels the question land, heavier than it should, because this is where the truth becomes complicated. This is where choosing what to say matters more than ever. And for a split second, her instinct is to answer honestly, to say everything exactly as it is. But she stops herself, remembering the rules, remembering why she is here, and instead she says, at a time when we both needed something real. The words come out softer than she expects, but they hold. They make sense in a way that does not feel like a lie. And for the first time, Nathaniel turns his head slightly toward her, just enough that she catches the shift in his expression, subtle, almost imperceptible, but real. And Victoria studies her for a moment longer before her smile returns, polite, controlled. Interesting, she says, and then she steps away, leaving behind a silence that feels heavier than the conversation itself. And Clara exhales slowly, realizing only then how much that moment mattered, how close she came to unraveling everything. And yet somehow, she did not. Somehow she stayed within the lines without losing herself completely. And as the night continues, as the room moves around them, Clara begins to understand something she did not expect. This is not just about pretending to be his wife. This is about learning how to exist in a world where truth is not about what is real, but about what people choose to believe. The rest of the evening moves differently after that moment, as if something invisible has shifted just enough for Clara to feel it, not in the way people look at her, but in the way Nathaniel does not look away as quickly as before, his attention lingering just a fraction longer each time she speaks. Each time she chooses her words carefully instead of saying everything that comes to mind. And she notices it, not because he makes it obvious, but because she has spent her whole life reading the smallest changes in people, the slight tightening of a jaw, the pause before a response, the quiet difference between interest and indifference. And for the first time, she is not sure which one he feels. You handled that well, he says at one point, low enough that only she can hear it. And Clara glances at him, surprised, because it sounds like approval, something she did not expect from a man who treats everything like a calculated move. I almost told the truth, she admits softly, her honesty slipping through again, and Nathaniel's expression shifts just slightly, something thoughtful crossing his features. You did, he replies, and she frowns, confused, because that is not how she sees it. Not all of it, she says, and he shakes his head once, subtle but certain. Enough of it, he answers, and that stays with her, echoing quietly as the night continues, because she is starting to understand that in his world, truth is not absolute. It is selective, shaped, controlled, and somehow, that realization feels both unsettling and strangely freeing at the same time. Later, as the crowd begins to thin and conversations soften into smaller clusters, Clara finds herself standing near one of the tall windows, the city stretching out below like a map of lights, her reflection faint against the glass. And for a moment, she lets herself breathe without thinking about what she is supposed to say or how she is supposed to stand. Just a few seconds of quiet in a night that has demanded so much of her. You look like you are somewhere else. Nathaniel's voice comes from beside her, and she does not startle this time. She just turns slightly, meeting his gaze with something more steady than before. I am just trying to understand your world, she says honestly, because there is no reason to hide that. And he follows her gaze out toward the city, his posture relaxed in a way she has not seen yet, less guarded, less controlled. It is not as complicated as it looks, he says, and Clara almost smiles at that, because from where she stands, it feels exactly that complicated. It is to me, she replies. And there is a pause, not uncomfortable, just real, and then she adds, people here do not say what they mean. And Nathaniel lets out a quiet breath, something between a laugh and an acknowledgement. They say what works, he corrects, and Clara studies him for a second, because that difference matters more than he realizes. And you? She asks, her voice softer now, more personal than anything she has said all night. Do you say what works, or what is true? And for the first time since she met him, Nathaniel does not answer immediately, his silence stretching just long enough to feel like something real, something unguarded, and when he finally speaks, his voice is lower, less certain than before. I used to think those were the same thing, he says, and Clara feels that answer settles somewhere deeper than she expects, because it is not just a statement. It is a crack, a glimpse of something beneath the control he wears so carefully. And before she can respond, before the moment can grow into something more, another voice calls his name from across the room, pulling him back into the version of himself the world expects. And just like that, the distance returns, subtle but unmistakable. He straightens slightly, his expression smoothing back into something composed, something untouchable. We should go, he says, his tone shifting back to business, and Clara nods. Even though part of her feels like something unfinished has just been interrupted, something she cannot quite define yet. But as they walk out together, past the fading lights and the last of the lingering conversations, Clara realizes that tonight was never just about pretending to be his wife. It was about learning the space between truth and performance, and somewhere in that space, without either of them fully noticing, something real has already begun to take shape. The ride back is quieter than before, not the tense silence of uncertainty, but something heavier, something that lingers between them without needing to be named. The city lights passing in long streaks outside the window as Clara sits with her hands folded in her lap, still feeling the echo of the evening in her chest. Every glance, every word, every moment where she almost stepped too far outside the role she agreed to play, and yet somehow did not. And that thought stays with her, because it feels like a small victory she does not quite know how to measure. You were watching everything, Nathaniel says. Suddenly, his voice calm but observant, breaking the silence in a way that feels less like interruption and more like continuation, and Clara turns slightly toward him, surprised again by how easily he notices things she does not say out loud. I had to, she answers, her tone thoughtful. I do not belong in rooms like that, so I needed to understand how they work. And Nathaniel studies her for a moment, not dismissing it, not correcting her, just considering. You adapted quickly, he says. And there is something in his voice this time, something quieter, less detached, and Clara feels it, even if she cannot fully define it yet. I listened, she replies, and then after a brief pause, she adds, people reveal more than they think when they are trying to impress each other, and that earns a faint reaction from him, not quite a smile, but close enough that it changes the space between them. That is true, he says, almost to himself, and for a moment, it feels like they are not standing on opposite sides of a contract. But somewhere in the same conversation, something balanced, something real. The car slows as it pulls into the private garage again, the quiet hum of the engine fading as the driver steps out, opening the door with the same practiced ease, and Clara hesitates just slightly before stepping out, not because she is unsure of what to do, but because she is aware now of how much has already changed in just one night, how easily she stepped into a role she thought would feel impossible, how naturally she started to understand a world she once felt completely outside of. And that realization follows her as they walk back inside. The building silent at this hour, the echo of their footsteps soft against the polished floors. Tomorrow will be more difficult, Nathaniel says as they reach the elevator, his tone returning to something more structured, more controlled, like he is reminding both of them that tonight was only the beginning. Why? Clara asks, her curiosity stronger now than her hesitation, and he meets her gaze directly this time, his expression steady. Because tonight, people were curious, he explains. Tomorrow, they will start asking questions, and Clara nods slowly, understanding settling in, because curiosity is easy to navigate, but questions require answers, and answers are where truth becomes complicated. The elevator doors close behind them, the quiet space enclosing them again, and for a moment, neither of them speaks, the silence stretching but not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. Until Clara breaks it, her voice softer than before. You said I should tell the truth, she reminds him, her eyes steady on his. What happens when the truth does not fit the story? And that question lingers between them, heavier than anything she has asked so far. And Nathaniel does not answer immediately, his gaze shifting just slightly, as if the question touches something deeper than he expected, something he does not often allow himself to consider. And when he finally speaks, his voice is quieter, less certain. Then we adjust the story, he says. But there is a subtle tension in the way he says it, something that suggests even he knows it is not always that simple. And Clara watches him carefully, because for the first time, she is not just trying to understand his world. She is trying to understand him, the man behind the control, the one who believes everything can be managed, shaped, rewritten if necessary, and yet hesitated, just for a second, when faced with a question that did not have an easy answer. The elevator doors open, and they step out into the quiet hallway, but Clara knows something has shifted again, not in the world around them, but in the space between truth and control, and somewhere inside that space, the line between what is real and what is only meant to appear real is starting to blur in a way neither of them can ignore anymore. The next morning does not ease into anything gentle. It arrives sharp and immediate, the kind of morning where the world feels like it has already decided something before you even open your eyes. And Clara feels at the moment her phone vibrates against the nightstand, a constant, relentless buzzing that does not stop, message after message stacking on top of each other until the silence of the room feels completely gone. She sits up slowly, her mind still catching up, her body still holding onto the quiet of the night before, and for a brief second she forgets where she is, forgets what she agreed to, until she reaches for the phone and everything comes rushing back at once. Headlines, images, her face captured beside Nathaniel's under bright lights, their hands linked, their expressions composed, the story already written by people who have never spoken to her. Mysterious woman appears at Reed Gala. Who is Nathaniel Reed's new wife? Strategic marriage or something more? And Clara stares at the screen, her breath slowing, not from panic, but from the strange realization that her life has shifted overnight in a way she cannot control, in a way she cannot step back from. And that thought settles heavy in her chest, because she has always been able to walk away from things before they become too much. But this is already everywhere, already larger than her. A knock at the door breaks through her thoughts, quick, precise, and before she can respond, it opens, and Nathaniel steps inside, already dressed, already composed, as if the world outside has not changed anything for him at all. You have seen it, he says, not a question, just a statement, and Clara nods slowly, setting the phone down. They made it sound like a story, she says quietly, her voice steady even though her thoughts are not, and Nathaniel walks further into the room, his gaze focused, controlled. Because it is a story, he replies. And Clara looks at him, really looks at him this time, because something about that answer feels different now, heavier than it did before. It feels real to them, she says, and there is a pause, a small one, but enough for her to notice, enough to understand that even he cannot fully ignore that shift. That is the point, he says finally, his tone firm again, returning to the structure he knows how to maintain. But Clara does not respond right away, because she is still looking at the screen. In her mind, at the way people have already decided who she is without asking, at the way truth has already been reshaped into something else entirely. Victoria will not stay quiet, Nathaniel continues, shifting the focus back to what matters to him. She will push this, test it, try to find weaknesses, and Clara exhales slowly, because she felt that last night, the way Victoria looked at her, the way her questions were not just questions, but probes, searching for something that did not fit. And if she does? Clara asks, her voice calm but deliberate, and Nathaniel meets her gaze directly. Then we give her nothing to use, he says, simple, controlled, like everything else he has built his life around. But Clara shakes her head slightly, not in disagreement, but in understanding, because she is starting to see the pattern, the way everything in his world is about maintaining an image, about staying ahead of perception. And she wonders, quietly, what happens when perception becomes stronger than control. They are going to ask me questions today, she says, more to herself than to him. And Nathaniel nods once, yes, and then after a brief pause, he adds, and you will answer them the way you did last night. And Clara lets out a soft breath, Because that answer is both simple and impossible at the same time. By choosing what to say, she repeats, and Nathaniel watches her carefully, as if he is trying to understand something he cannot quite define yet. Exactly, he says, but there is something different in his tone now, something less certain than before, something that suggests this situation is not unfolding as predictably as he expected, and Clara feels it too. The shift, the way the story is no longer just something they are controlling, but something that is starting to take on a life of its own. And as she stands there, holding onto the quiet space between what is real and what is expected, she realizes that the most difficult part of this arrangement is not going to be pretending for the world. It is going to be deciding which parts of herself she is willing to hide, and which one she refuses to let go, even if it changes everything. By noon, the story has already grown teeth, not sharp in a way that wounds, but precise in a way that corners, shaping itself across screens, interviews, and quiet conversations behind closed doors, and Clara feels it as she steps into the lobby beside Nathaniel. Cameras waiting this time, not surprised anymore, not curious in the same way, but focused, prepared, voices calling out questions before they even reach the entrance, and for a brief second, everything slows, the sound narrowing into something distant, because this is different from last night. This is not a controlled environment. This is not a room where people follow unspoken rules. This is exposure, unpredictable and immediate. Stay close, Nathaniel says quietly, his tone steady but more alert than before, and Clara nods. Not because she needs the instruction, but because she understands now that this is where things can shift quickly. They step forward together, and the questions come fast, overlapping, louder than expected. How long have you been married? Why keep it a secret? Is this a business arrangement? And Clara feels the pull of each question, the way they try to draw her into giving something more than she should, something that could unravel everything if she lets it. And for a moment, her instinct rises again, the need to answer honestly, to correct what is wrong, to explain what people are misunderstanding. But then she remembers, not just the rules, but the balance she found last night, the space between truth and control, and she takes a breath, steadying herself. Some things are not meant to be public from the beginning, she says, her voice calm, clear enough to carry, and the questions pause just slightly, not because they are satisfied, but because the answer works, it fits, it holds without revealing too much, and beside her, Nathaniel remains composed, his presence grounding but not guiding this time, allowing her to navigate in her own way, which surprises her more than anything. Another question pushes forward, sharper, more direct. Did you marry him for his position? And Clara feels the shift immediately, the intention behind it, the attempt to reduce everything into something simple, something transactional, and for a second, she looks at Nathaniel, not for permission, but for understanding, and then she answers, no. The word comes out without hesitation, because that part is completely true, and then she adds, softer but firm, I stayed because I saw something real. And the moment stretches, just long enough for the meaning to settle, for people to interpret it in ways that serve the story they want to believe. And that is when Clara realizes something important. She is not just responding anymore. She is shaping the narrative in her own way, not by lying, but by choosing which truths to give. They move past the crowd after that, security guiding them forward, the noise fading behind them as the doors close, leaving a quieter space that feels almost unreal after the intensity outside. And Clara exhales slowly, her heart still steady, not racing the way she expected, because something has changed inside her, something that feels like control, not over the situation, but over herself. You did not answer what they asked, Nathaniel says once they are alone, his voice thoughtful, not critical, and Clara looks at him, her expression calm. I answered what mattered, she replies, and there is a pause, a longer one this time, as he studies her in a way that feels different from before, less like evaluation and more like realization. You are not following the script, he says, and Clara almost smiles, because that has never been something she is good at. I am following what is true enough, she corrects gently, and Nathaniel exhales quietly. Something shifting behind his composed exterior, something he is not used to, because for the first time, the control he relies on is not coming from him. It is coming from her, from the way she moves through uncertainty without breaking, from the way she holds on to truth without exposing everything. And as he watches her, standing there not as someone pretending to belong, but as someone who has found her place within the chaos, Nathaniel begins to understand something he has not considered before, that the one thing he tried to control through a contract may be the one thing he cannot control at all. And for the first time, that thought does not feel like a risk, it feels like something he does not want to lose. The afternoon does not settle the way Nathaniel expects it to, because instead of tightening his control over the situation, everything begins to slip into something less predictable, something shaped not by strategy, but by the quiet presence of the woman standing beside him. And it becomes undeniable when Victoria requests a private meeting, her tone polite, but her intent unmistakably sharp, the kind of invitation that is not meant to be declined. And now they are seated across from her in a quiet conference room high above the city, the glass walls reflecting the skyline but offering no comfort, only transparency, only exposure. And Clara feels it again, that same pressure she felt the night before, except this time it is focused, deliberate, aimed directly at her. "I prefer clarity," Victoria says smoothly, her hands folded neatly on the table, her eyes steady. Especially when something as significant as this appears without warning. And Nathaniel begins to respond, his voice calm, controlled, already prepared to steer the conversation where he wants it to go. But Clara speaks first, not loudly, not forcefully, just clearly. "What would you like to know?" And the room shifts slightly, not in sound, but in balance, because Victoria's attention locks onto her fully now, as if reassessing, as if recalculating. "I would like to understand how something so unexpected became so serious," she replies, her words precise, each one chosen carefully. And Clara feels the weight of the moment, the way everything could tilt depending on what she says next, the contract, the story, the image they have created, all of it hanging in the space between truth and expectation. And for a second, she considers staying within the safe lines, giving an answer that sounds right without meaning anything real. But something in her resists that now, something that has been building quietly since the moment she signed her name. "It became serious when it stopped feeling like something we needed to explain," she says, her voice steady, and Nathaniel turns his head slightly, not interrupting, not stopping her, just listening in a way he has not before. And Victoria studies her, her expression unreadable. "That is not an answer," she says calmly, and Clara nods once, because she understands that it is the only honest one I can give without turning it into something it is not. She replies, and there is a pause, longer this time, heavier, because the truth she is offering does not fit neatly into the narrative Victoria is trying to dissect, and that makes it harder to challenge, harder to dismantle. And Nathaniel feels it, the shift in the room. The way control is no longer something he is holding alone, but something being reshaped right in front of him, not through force, not through strategy, but through something far simpler and far more difficult to counter: sincerity. Victoria leans back slightly, her gaze still fixed on Clara, but there is a change now, subtle, almost imperceptible, respect mixed with caution. "You are either very careful," she says slowly, "or very honest." And Clara meets her gaze without hesitation. "I am trying to be both," she answers, and that lands in a way nothing else has, quiet but undeniable. And for the first time since this began, Victoria does not push further. She simply nods once, as if acknowledging something she cannot quite define, and the meeting ends not with confrontation, but with a quiet understanding that the situation is no longer as simple as it seemed. When they step out into the hallway, the air feels different, lighter, but also more real, and Nathaniel stops walking for just a moment, his expression no longer perfectly composed, something deeper surfacing in its place. "You changed the outcome," he says, not as an observation, but as a realization. And Clara looks at him, her voice softer now, but certain. "No," she replies, "I just did not pretend." And that is when it finally becomes clear to him, not as a thought, but as something undeniable, that everything he built this arrangement on, control, precision, predictability, none of it is what made this work. It was her, the one variable he thought he could manage, the one truth he thought he could shape. And now, standing there in the quiet space between what was supposed to be an illusion and what has become something else entirely. Nathaniel understands the one thing he has been avoiding since the